Do a tweet about it. 2-second job. Get it sorted. You let the team
Get
down.
sorted, Bruce. Look, I've inadvertently started while you were giving Bruce a hard time to deliberately make sure. Put that up again, Ian. Make sure our dear viewer can see the hard time you're giving him.
Let's grab that again then. Hang on a second. I have closed it down.
Oh, it would have been seamless otherwise.
Screen.
I shall have to delegate this to my wife.
Your admin assistant now.
There you go.
17 tweets, 108 followers. He's not very kind to his 108 followers, is he?
No.
That's not even one each.
He doesn't post and he's still got more than me.
Well, there we are. And hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. If you've joined us, 2 minutes early, something like that. Ian was laying into Bruce, so why not? That's what I say. We are here. I hope you've all had a good week in Interland, dear viewer, and everyone else here has had a good week. Where should we kick off? Oh, I know. Because it's Ian of the Concrete Mixer's favourite subject. I understand there is a new camera coming to the market, Ian, for the Mavic. Perhaps you could unwrap it a little bit for us.
Well, not a new camera, a new lens. Yeah. So that's an anamorphic lens. It's called the Moment. I was hoping actually you could maybe get them on the show and then we can quiz them a bit, because I'll just show you what we've seen in the past. So this is one that was for the GoPro. It's from a company called Letus, and it's essentially the same thing. It's a 1.33 times anamorphic, and that's quite heavy actually on this one. This was almost as much as a GoPro in itself, so it was quite tricky to put on a gimbal. So what they've come up with is a anamorphic for the Mavic, which they've got down to a very lightweight. You still have to have a counterbalance, which they've included with it, and the design of that looks quite nice actually. So in theory it looks all right, but it'd be nice to know, long term, how is the counterbalance going to be? Is it going to take its toll on the gimbal? And knowing a bit more about the lens, they say it's glass, but given it's so light, I did ask the question, is this genuinely glass? Is there any plastic involved? I'm assuming not, but they didn't reply. So it'd just be nice to have the ins and outs of it. I think there was a review that said you actually had to crop in from the sides as well, which would defeat the point of having the wider aspect ratio. But I suspect it's probably the review that's wrong. But yeah, I was just interested by it because there's not been a proper anamorphic on a drone. That was the nearest that I've just shown you, because you could just about get away with it on the GoPro camera. But that was only because the gimbal that came with that was really a proper handheld gimbal. So yeah, I'm just interested to see how that gets on. But it would be nice to see, and I don't know why DJI haven't even thought of it, was to do a drone where anamorphic's actually an option at the outset.
Isn't it super niche? You're the only person I know that posts dozens of pictures of them.
It's not that niche actually. I mean, the anamorphic shooters group, there's like one on Facebook. It's about 11,000 people, and these are people that are, they're dropping £2,000-3,000 a time on anamorphic lenses, because there is that much of a buzz around them. The Panasonic GH5 and GH5S, all the Panasonic stuff supports anamorphic out of the box, so they consider it important enough to include in the software. It does de-squeeze in the viewfinder and so on. So people don't know what it does. It's basically you'll see it better with something like that maybe. It's a lens that's kind of oval shaped, and what it does is it squeezes the image in. So that's when you talk about like 1.33 times, that's in by a third. We've got 1.5 times in by a half. We've got 2 times, obviously, it's squeezing it in half. So what it does is it squeezes the image in optically, and then you squeeze it back out in post. So you effectively get a higher resolution. So that resolution will be up to a third or twice. So if you've got a 4K picture, you're essentially squeezing that out to 8K. And it has there's consequences of that process where you get the lens flare that's horizontal, which is the anamorphic look, and that's a characteristic of going through that process. So that's effectively what you're buying, is that kind of cinematic look because of the process it's gone through.
It'll be interesting to see if you're going to have to record it in 4:3 or not. I don't know what they're doing with regards to the recording aspect, or whether
No,
they're keeping it at
that's
60.
that's why they've gone for 1.33 times, because that allows you to do 16:9.
Okay.
That takes it out there. With the third on, it comes to I don't think it's 2.3 now. I think it's 240, but it's basically it's the kind of aspect ratio you would consider to look cinematic, because you wouldn't have to have the bars at top and the bottom.
But to make it clear, it's not actually giving you higher resolution. It's giving you a wider field of view, which you can then interpolate up to a high resolution image. So it doesn't increase the number of pixels, does it?
It's essentially, I guess it's kind of slightly a fake higher resolution, but because it's an optical effect, it looks the part. So there's definitely a perception there. If you looked at it with your eyes, it does look different to simply, trying to expand out a piece of footage.
As opposed to looking at it with your ears.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
I'm
Well, why
trying
wouldn't?
Sorry.
But why wouldn't I? Sorry, why wouldn't I just do some sort of effect in post to make it look like that?
You can't get the look in post. What you can do is you can put lens flare on, but then again, that's not accurate. There's only a few plugins that will accurately track, so that you get because you don't just get the horizontal. You get lens flares that come off that. So if you're moving left or right, there'll be consequences on the flaring. So there are a few expensive plugins that will do the tracking right, but most of it you can tell it's a cheap fake. So there's that. On the drone, it is harder. What you essentially get is you get a slightly softer vintage look. So you could technically fake that. What you get with a proper genuine lens is you get the bokeh that is oval, and you get a different depth of field. So those things you can't fake in post. But with a drone, because you've got your lens at infinity and you don't get to see the bokeh and so on, you get less of that flavor. So you could argue that you could do a bit of it, but I see fake lens flare, and 9 times out of 10 I can spot it straight away. But if you looked at like the first season of Star Trek Discovery, immediately obvious, so obvious with everyone pointing it out. By season 2, they'd invested in proper anamorphic lenses.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say, it'd be interesting to know if it's in FOV mode or HQ, because obviously on the Mavic 2, there's 2 modes, how it reads the sensor. In FOV mode, field of view mode, it reads the whole sensor and then scales that down, whereas in in HQ mode, it takes a 16:9 wide section of the center of the 1-inch sensor. I'm guessing it's in FOV mode. Be interesting. Was it 200 quid, isn't it?
It is at the Kickstarter price, and then it goes up.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of money for a piece of anamorphic glass. I'm sure the Leaks one was more money than that. And if you're buying genuine anamorphic glass, sky's the limit. So, yeah. But from that viewpoint, it's a very cheap point for you to have a play about with it, at least.
But when you talk about Kickstarter, does that mean that you're basically putting some money into the pot, and then you've got like a 50-50 chance as to whether you will actually receive it or not?
I think with this should be fine, because they've done a Kickstarter before. They did the moment lens for like your iPhone and your Android, so that was successful. So I think it'll just be a continuation on. So it's stuff they've already done. So all they'll be doing is putting it there with the counterweight and the work that they've done. So I foresee that everyone would get it. But I do think about most Kickstarters, I'll be surprised if it lands on time.
They do look to be an established company, don't they? When you look at their website, they've already got a number of products, and that seems to be the difference here. Normally it's a new start that's jumped up from nowhere with no history. At least they are a brand in themselves.
And it's interesting to note that even established companies like Canon are now using Kickstarters to get or crowdfunding to develop new products.
Yeah,
I've not seen that with Canon. That's interesting.
It's a I was, when you look at the whole Lily drone, there was the other one which was actually not far from me. Actually, the irony about that one was, there's been a huge amount of bad reputation around these things. Unfortunately, I think if you start getting big companies doing it, I think it could be very interesting. I suppose it's a way for them to judge, should we put any more money into this or not? Should we go ahead, and perhaps we'll actually get more products that we want this way.
Yeah, that must be what they're doing with it. So you snap this lens on and off and the counterweight at the back. Won't that be a bit of a faff when you've only got one Mavic in the world, or would you dedicate an aircraft to this?
It'll be a little. I guess it's a little bit of a faff, but I guess if you were putting this on, you would have a specific shot you were after, and it's probably seconds of effort. So I don't think I'll put people off. But what I did notice with the first moment for the mobile phone, you go on eBay, there are a lot of people that have bought, and I've just thought it can't be. They've just they've used it for a few shots and just got bored of it, and then just gone and sold it on. So I still think you'll find that with your drone users. It'll be mainly the people that have shooting with your GH5 and your Sonys that are already shooting anamorphic with their ground cameras that want to mix in with the drone, and they want it so it's more of a genuine connect between the shots.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the gimbal reacts, because Ian spoke to me about this in the week, actually. Quickly sent me a message. I was tied up most of the week, but the Mavic 2 gimbal is probably the most sensitive on any DJI product I've come across. I mean, you can literally tap it with your finger and it will lose where it is, but it goes back. So I don't see there being a damage issue involved with it at all. However, unless that counterweight is absolutely spot on, you could start getting the gimbal just go, oh, and just drop down, because it's got motor overload protection. So if there's any issues, the gimbal will just turn itself off. As you say, they've got this counterweight on the back, so it's going to have to be spot on, absolutely spot on.
And is it compatible with all the normal ND filters and so forth?
Looking at it, it replaces. So there's no ND option. It's as it is, isn't it, Ian? Looking at it.
I think so, because otherwise you'd have more weight involved. I noticed they were doing their own filters, and actually I think some of the NDs did fit onto the anamorphic. So
if it goes over the top, the ND, technically the ND replaces the front glass, which is the UV. So if it goes over the top of that, you could have an ND still on if it goes over the top.
Yeah, I had a feeling that they had a clip-on ND, but to be honest, I've not really looked at the ND filters in any depth. So I got the impression you could, but I didn't pay too much attention to that.
Well,
I'm tempted to order.
We'll try and get them on. I'll try and get them on next week. I'll try and get them on. We'll have a look. And then I'm bored of this now because I've no interest in it at all. Oh, no, that's not what they do on things, is it? They don't sound bored of this. Let's move on. but let's move on. Let's move on to overweight drones. Did we see? And funny enough, I've got North Wales news overnight. Overweight drone smashes into the ground, 220-foot fall. Did we see that? And what because I've seen lots of pictures of things. What was it that actually fell to the ground?
M210, I believe. I think, was it an M200 with a LiDAR on the bottom?
Yes, it was a LiDAR, definitely. It was a payload, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think it was an M200 or 210.
That was an expensive thing to drop to the ground and quite heavy over probably working somewhere where there might be people nearby. I'm sure they did their operational safety case and all those other good things. But what do we think happened?
It crashed. I think Jimmy Craig had something to do with it.
Yeah, I think it looks like someone's built it up with no regard for what the airframe's capable of carrying. That's what it appears to be the case, doesn't it?
And this is interesting on the back of the fact. We had that S-Speeder that we talked about. I was on it there, but you talked about the previous week, because that's two really commercial operations in a short amount of time, where really things had happened in both. Where from an outside, it doesn't look very prudent.
Did we see their triumphant airspeeder video announcing their success at Goodwood? I think it was in the early hours this morning that came out.
So all the press releases, they went for town on it, talking about their successful flight. They really were trying to keep that under wraps. And you did notice there was at least one person caught in the press footage that was recorded with a mobile phone, and that footage never came out. So I think they've done a bit to say to people, don't share this.
Well, I think if you look at that "Didn't We Do Well" video, I think you can actually see the bit where it's accelerating away. It looks, because apparently, I'm sure we've all heard it when something's gone wrong like that, and they do accelerate away. The old engine note when it sounded just like it. Oh, I know that noise. I don't know what that is.
It's normally the moment your hopes and dreams are heading off into the sunset. Yes,
Exactly.
So this M210 thing, I believe I might know a little bit about this. I think it's something to do with the firmware and the software compatibility with the drone. I've heard through the grapevine that apparently the software that we're using wasn't a DJI piece of software; it was a third-party piece of software, and that was what caused the drone to slam down. But it kind of reinforces the fact that I probably bet that most PFCO operators out there probably haven't got any procedures with regards to testing their aircraft after upgrading or changing the software that they're using for their mission planner. And it kind of reinforces the fact that like these kind of procedures is actually pretty important. Turning up to site with a new piece of software probably a little bit of a bad idea.
Yeah, it's better to get over a field or something first and test out. But there were three factors. You're correct. It was A, it was the payload weight. It was B, it was the software. And C, they said that they'd attempted to go into a manual mode. So this is the trouble as well. People always think manual will save my life if something goes wrong. No, it won't, because you're still going through the same flight controller. There's no such thing as manual. All it does is you're basically taking more code out of use. So basically all it's doing is saying, if you're in manual mode, follow these rules. If you're in GPS, follow these rules. And sometimes actually a drone will function better when it's in one of the automatic modes. It will know it's falling, and it will actually up more power than you would get switching out. So it sounds like that was a factor as well. The suggestion was that's not why it hit the ground as it did, because they were trying to compensate that way.
Well, I tell you what else blows my mind is people ranty hat. I do need a ranting hat, but people will insist on, if you've got 15 switches on a radio, making sure you've got 15 different modes selected on each of the switches. And even I have actually seen this. I've seen someone turn a transmitter up the other way because they made sense of modes in that way. Well, really, just keep it simple, people. Just the less switch operations you've got. But that speaks to, as James has correctly said, testing your software, testing your loads, testing your flight procedures, just actually being up to speed with your aircraft. And sorry, it's a ranty man, isn't it? But people don't have to make things complicated for themselves sometimes. Less is more.
Well, this is where I kind of always advocated actually some of the more simple aircraft are actually pretty good, because at least you know what they're going to do. When you switch it into manual mode, you know you're going to get throttle control. You're not going to get some derivation of throttle control which is going to bring in this sensor or that sensor, or decide to go and put in some kind of like bumper effect because it's detected that you've got a blade of grass in front of you. I think sometimes the simplicity is actually a good thing, but I guess that it depends on the sort of skill of the operator. Sometimes if you're flying around and you've got a low skilled operator, then it's good to have these safety features in normal flight, but it's when it goes wrong, that's the point where you think, well, actually just give me some manual control of this thing and I might be able to get it out of the doodah.
I'd be interested to see who built it, because mounting a LiDAR on any aircraft is not a DIY job for anyone. I'd be interested to know who put the aircraft together, because I've built a couple of big birds. I've actually mounted a LiDAR on one, and it isn't, it's not a simple task. We're not a plug and play yet, let's put it that way. So either someone's not done their due diligence here, or someone has been playing at the system builder when they haven't taken into account. Because at the end of the day, it's basic physics. You've got to make sure the aircraft is capable of carrying the load from the manufacturer. And as a commercial operator, you have no choice in that. You might push your luck as a hobby guy, put an extra battery on or something like that. But as a commercial operator, you've got a maximum takeoff weight, and that's in your ops manual for starters. You have to write it in. So someone somewhere has been very, very silly. That's for sure. And the AIB was all over them as well, weren't they?
But this is what I've been saying for a while. Is actually, what's the biggest risk for drones? Is it air incursions, or is it people on the ground? In my opinion, I think the bigger risk is actually ground risks rather than air risks. You've seen, I've heard of quite a number of drones coming down onto the ground, but I've only heard of one globally that's actually hit an aircraft and it caused minor damage. So, what's the bigger risk here?
A quick question, Ian. I'd read the drone it was on didn't have retracts. Is that correct?
Yeah, the M200 doesn't.
Saying that the LiDAR, that was a bad decision anyway, because that would block some of the LiDAR.
It's a weird build. It would, if you were going to pick a big aircraft, Alta, M600, something like that all day long for something like that, I don't see why you'd put it under an M200, not the ideal craft of choice.
Mitchell Roberts in the comments saying it looks like it should be on M600, so it looks like he's concurring with you there. Yeah. But I mean, what min weight are we talking about for LiDAR? About 1.5 kilos these days?
Yeah, some of the. Let's have a look.
I mean, they're a bit.
And the rest, you're probably closer to 2.5, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know most of them are north of that, but I was trying to be generous and go for the lightest one I could think of.
Yeah.
And of course it won't be cheap, will it? I mean, that's a sensor that you don't want to be playing around with, really.
And you really want to be choosing an aircraft that's got decent redundancy for a sensor of that price. If you're shoving 20 grand a payload under it, 4 motors doesn't come into it. Doesn't matter who makes it.
Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of Mitchell again mentions a safety culture. We don't have common sense of safety here, but no, that is basic sort of aviation stuff, isn't it? Really, it's basic. Well, any business. No, I mean, no business, as he says, is 20k, try 100k. You can't afford to be losing money like that. And I'm sure whoever the insurers as well are quite. I know the AAIB are interested, but the insurers will be very interested, I should imagine.
Yeah, and I'm guessing they won't pay out because they wouldn't under normal business insurance. That would be deemed incompetence, basically, wouldn't it? You would be deemed a breach of your own insurance on that.
Well, you've got to flown it on a Tuesday when your insurance said a Monday only, or no Tuesdays allowed, and they'll know they won't pay out. They'll find the very slightest reason not to pay out, won't they? Insurance is insurance. Yeah, it was very interesting, and it was interesting. It made quite so much news in the UK. So, if we are driving this, do you think perhaps, Bruce? Do you think it was something to do? Do you think the GPS system went down on it? Maybe.
Oh, bound to. Yeah, so unreliable global positioning sat-nav systems these days.
They are, aren't they? They seem to be, don't they? I mean, especially if you're if you're using Italian ground stations. It's quite a thing. Was it last Thursday, I think, wasn't it? Was it last Thursday that Galileo went down and it's still down?
It was Thursday. No, it was Friday New Zealand time, I think, or whatever. So, yeah, it was just before the weekend. And it seems strange to me that you've got such a complex system with a single point of failure. And so one ground station goes out and the whole network just becomes unavailable. That someone didn't think that through very well. And I can only hope that the people that did the GLONASS system and the US GPS system don't have the same kind of topology that would produce the same kind of single point failures.
At least it's one bonus for Brexit, given the kick the UK out of it. So someone must have been having a giggle at that.
No, but the UK was running the ground station.
Oh yeah,
and then they moved it. We were running it. The UK was running it. As soon as it's moved to Italy, it's fallen over.
It's insane that it is still down. That's the part that's beyond a joke here. We have a system that if this was 5 years down the line, we would probably have a decent amount of hardware, day-to-day hardware. I'm not talking about stuff that aircraft, but our sat navs, our phones, our general stuff we all rely on to find out where we've parked the car before we go out with the family. And if that goes down, we don't expect that stuff to happen. It's as simple as that.
Quite a bit of money, isn't it? With
He
that,
was
you
gone.
had to bend over, and with
Yes.
that,
The interesting thing is, though, that we have a situation where we've seen how vulnerable these things are, and what happens with the big coronal mass ejection that everyone's predicting will happen eventually, and it takes out all those birds. Where's our fallback? What are we going to do when GPS no longer functions? And it'll take months to get a new constellation of satellites up there if they all get blown away by some coronal mass discharge from the sun.
Well, this is actually one of the major points for BV loss. Actually, is I know back from my university days is that GPS or having a secondary form of navigation is actually really important for beyond visual line of sight flying. And the CAA were very nervous about people relying on GPS as a primary means of navigation. Pilots, when they're flying around, they don't generally tend to use GPS. PPL pilots will when they're flying around using their app, but actually they should be using either sort of bearings and wind direction. They should be using beacons and things like that. And they should also be using sort of ground, looking down at the ground and trying to navigate using those sort of methods. So, how do we actually go and get a drone to be able to deal with GPS out in the case of a beyond visual line of sight flight?
What's that?
You know where you're flying. You survey your flight area, and it's like if you're flying without GPS, you just look at the ground. You know where you are. You know where you came from. I always make sure when I'm flying any kind of up to the limits of visual line of sight, we might say, I always know my area. I reconnoiter it first with Google Earth, or I do some provisional flight, so I know that if the GPS fails for whatever reason, I can find my own way back. And I tend to fly bareback FPV anyway, where I don't use a flight controller or an FPV, so I rely on my ability to read the landscape. But the thing that's interesting, you're saying how pilots don't use GPS. What about the A320s and the A380s? Do you really think those autopilots they've got in those things use sextants and compasses?
No, but they use INAS and they use the radio beacons as well. Are pulled into they have multiple channels of navigation information coming into them. That almost sounds like a grown-up statement.
But
so
on international flights, you don't have a lot of that stuff available to you.
No, that's true. Yeah, no. That's a fair point, well made. And I think they switched Loran off, didn't they?
I think they use like the long range beacons, don't they, for international?
I think they switched those off. I think I could be wrong, but I think they switched those off, and they're switching a lot off the NDBs off and stuff like that now, aren't they? So perhaps we have reached that tipping point of reliance on GPS and stuff like that we start switching the gear off just when we need it. But
I believe manned aircraft aren't allowed to use GPS as a single means of navigation. I think they have to have at least two forms of navigation, whether that's beacons, visual or whatever, as well as GPS. They can use GPS, primarily because it's good, but they'll have to have a backup just in case.
What day did this go down? Again, was it Thursday?
Have you found a conspiracy?
I thought it was Friday, but it's around then.
Thursday or Friday.
Okay,
yeah.
so we're heading towards we're 5 days now, including weekend, and they still haven't been able to get it back up. That is quite concerning, to say the least. Okay, if you've got a glitch, you've got a software issue. It's been up and running.
I think it's running in some sort of degraded capacity mode or something.
I got an email from someone that said that their system told them they were at 20,000 feet above the capital of Turkey or something when they were sitting at home. So it is severely degraded.
But this also links to, was it the week before or the week before, when ADSB went down in Rockwell Collins gear because they did a GPS update to their equipment, and that grounded 300 odd aircraft in America. Because that went down, another GPS-based issue. In this case, it was the American system, but within Rockwell Collins receivers. So, yeah, aviation authorities plainly have some worries to be worried about with these things.
Are these all made by the same company that manages the Gatwick air traffic control software by any chance?
Oh, now then, easy, steady. Now, come on. This isn't a tinfoil hat, but it's a tin hat that'll do. Yes, heavy-duty tinfoil. Yes, well, yeah, you're referring to Gatwick being down for, it was just 6 hours or something after last week's show, wasn't it? It was the day after on Wednesday, wasn't it? Yes. Or we're just all going to nod on this one. We're not going to say anything about Gatwick. We're just going to nod.
What's that? Is it? Do you think they might have had a problem before they sold it as well, but they said it was a drone?
No, come on, they couldn't have done a thing like that. It must have been a drone. It can only have been a drone.
I heard it was definitely a brand new problem that had never occurred before. It was a one-off on this case.
Oh, a one-off that they tested about 8 months earlier.
Yeah.
And funny enough,
situation.
Here in South Africa, we had an air traffic hack this week that our aviation authority is investigating. So perhaps people
Will they catch you, Gary? Do you reckon they'll catch you, or are you pretty safe?
No. On the envelope, I wrote your name and address, so it's all right. Yeah, because I did it via post, a snail mail. It's very reliable.
It's almost as if these air traffic management systems were developed before the age of cybersecurity was an issue, and then they added the security aspects after they designed them.
Sounds a lot like the banking industry, that.
Yeah.
Whose brilliant idea was, we've got an air traffic control system. Hey, let's connect it to the internet. What a great idea.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, it was only sort of modems on plain old telephone lines, so it was quite easy to be disrupted back then. I know they're worried about it then, but I'm sure. Well, I suppose at the end of the day, I was talking to a car mechanic, and we were talking about it. I said, I want to get one of those Bluetooth devices to go in the in the port so I can monitor what the engine's doing. And he's saying, oh no, don't do that, because stacks of people are getting viruses introduced via their smartphones into their car's computer via that very route. And I should think there's plenty of people with smartphones at air traffic control centers all over the place, dialing up via the internet at work to do whatever, that could also perhaps do the same. I don't know. Thoughts?
Your biggest risk with phones and the likes via connecting to USB to charge, but most corporate companies now have software that would lock the USB to try and prevent anything getting onto the network that way.
But I wonder. I'd heard, as I reported before, I'd heard that there was an infrastructure attack the first time round at Gatwick. And that infrastructure attack was then repeated up at Birmingham, and it seems to have been repeated in a few other places around the world. So if I were a betting man, I'd say there's a bit of kit in there somewhere in those systems that's susceptible to it, and somebody knows it. But that's full tinfoil hat off now.
What is interesting in this whole thing is if we look at Silverstone this weekend, where there was an incident where there was 1 or 2 drones and they were picked up really quickly, that if there is actually a drone, that they can be found quite quickly as well. So it does dispel the whole Gatwick thing even more so.
I think the thing with that as well is we will find out, but I suspect it is just Aeroscope, because it's the police's own system, and I can't see the police would have spent all the cash on Metis or on Ords. But we shall see. There's a freedom of information request there.
You put one in because you asked them nicely and they wouldn't tell you.
They wouldn't tell me, so
But surely it's not going to be. It's going to be simpler than that, isn't it? There would have been so many policemen and marshals around that someone would have gone, look at that.
They've specifically said they use software. I thought that was quite an interesting term as well, because they didn't say hardware. They were quite reviewed software to find them. And then I'm suspicious because obviously the second one wasn't a DJI drone, so I think it's more likely they just picked up the DJI gun over there and he's had 2 drones and affected them both off the one person.
Yeah, poor guy's lost all of it.
Yeah. which hasn't been clarified. But when it's taxpayers' money that's being spent on counter US, I don't like the secret squirrel stuff. Why not just be straight? We bought this. It did it. It was a success. So why be secretive about something that's a success?
And that's the funny thing. None of us are against it. That's the funny thing. No one in the industry is against counter drone technology. We all pretty much understand there is a need for it in certain circumstances, used in the right way.
Yeah, I think though that needs quantifying. I'm not against it, apart from when it's actually disrupting the drone, where it could actually cause more harm than good. And I don't like for actually a number of reasons that I think they're absolutely stupid. Is the counter UAS that looks like a gun. Yeah. So you can have the problem as well. Someone's pointing up at the sky. Someone calls the police. There's a guy pointing this gun up at the sky. Armed police turn up. He could well get shot. So I think the idea of having counter UAS in the style of a gun is very stupid. And I also don't like the idea of ones that just disrupt the drone. And that's your first, that's your first and only option with them is to disrupt the drone. You don't know how they're going to
they should make those counter UAS things in the shape of a knife, because then no one would even care.
I was going to say unicorns or something else. I was going to call for a vote. Let's have a vote on what shape they should be.
That's got to be to serve the US market in the shape of a gun at the end of the day, isn't it?
If in London, if it was the shape of a knife, they'd just another knife. We don't care.
You've been watching our news, Bruce. Yeah. As you say, it's interesting though that when you have a situation where there was a drone. I'm not saying he was flying illegally. We don't know the ins and outs of the case. The guy might have been flying normally. But what's interesting is from a technical aspect, there was a drone and it was detected. Nice, easy, dealt with. Yeah, at Gatwick.
Yeah, and the interesting point as well is, because I checked with, it was all done on Twitter, it was all backwards and forwards, but with Altitude Angel, and said, would that NOTAM have been shown in the DJI Go app? And it's a case of no, the data's there, but it doesn't yet highlight, it doesn't inform the pilot, and didn't stop them either. So that in that case, that's just a lack of information. If the app will provide that information, that pilot may well not have taken off, and that incident wouldn't have been there. So I'm hoping over time DJI do sort of integrate all that additional data as standard.
Yeah, I need to look at that, because in the US it is. Now, I thought it was in Europe as well, but I saw those comments and I didn't reply because I haven't had a chance to dig in that. In the US, yes, but again, it would require a data connection. At the end of the day, if a pilot leaves, he has the data set he's got when he leaves, unless he's got an online connection and it downloads. Now, for instance, in the US, it does update because they were knocking guys out for flying when you had the fires, for instance, and things like that. But it's possible that's not in the UK. I haven't actually checked that. That's one I need to dig into a little bit, actually.
I'm quite looking forward to Drone and Sundry episode 8194, when we're still sitting here on rocking chairs and cardigans, and we're still talking about Gatwick.
Well, I think
do you remember when there used to be an airfield there, but now it's all been bulldozed over and it's all flowers and orchards? Do you remember those days, back when there was runways there?
And there'll be a guy with a metal detector who finds something, and we'll be talking about the conspiracy of he's found a piece of the alleged road.
He found the drone. Yeah. Time team Gatwick. Yeah, no. The whole thing just smells, isn't it? Left, right, and centre, whichever way you look at it, it's just all fishy and weird. And maybe one of their people's been paid by a counter UAS company or a UTM company to go to America on holiday recently. Who knows? But I mean, far be it from me to speculate about things like that.
There's a simple reality with this, though, isn't it? Ian's got a load of freedom information requests in, I believe, Ian, haven't you, on to Gatwick?
I've just got a couple, but yeah, I've just asked some specific questions because the police are contradicting themselves on them, and that's what I don't like as well. Is when the people there in authority, they're telling us this narrative. At least don't contradict yourselves and give us it straight.
They're being evasive.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to be evasive in this situation. This is very simple. If there was a drone and they couldn't find it, there is no reason to be evasive. The more they're evasive with the data they try to hand out, and the more they refuse and they try not to give us that data, the more it shows there's more to this story. Because if there's nothing to hide, the story is they couldn't find a drone and they should give us all the information around that. It's simple.
it looks like somebody's made a policy decision to blank and delay and not reply to freedom of information requests that mention the word Gatwick, because you've got ones that mention the word Gatwick that are 6 months now, and every time the person replies, they don't get a response. Oh, it's sorry, we've lost it. Can you send it again? And yet, in the time being, they're replying to other freedom of information requests. So there is a specific not replying to Gatwick, and some of them, what they're requesting, would be exempt with the Freedom of Information Act. But the question still is begged: is why don't they just reply and say, sorry, what you've asked for can't be provided because it's exempt for this reason? And it's just that weirdness of no reply at all, that, you know, that they're just sat there, and it's over 6 months now. And the concern with it all is obviously Gatwick's being used to sort of inform the legislation that's happening at the moment. And if what the narrative is around Gatwick actually isn't true, then we're having legislation based on something where it may turn out it wasn't what we thought it was.
Well, that leads us very, very nicely into, we've got to mention the BBC before, because I want to quiz Nicola very much about that VTOL and see if he's built it yet. But I've got to mention the BBC again. I've got to mention everybody getting standard responses. And I've got to say, well done to James if you're wearing your AR PAS hat for also having another pop at them. So I thought that's fair play. You got a response, didn't you, James?
We did, yeah. No, it was all very positive, and everyone supported us, and there was no problems whatsoever.
Oh, that's all right then. Oh, good. Right, we can draw a line under that then.
The one weird thing was, one guy did get. No, as I said, the one weird thing, one guy did get a slightly different response. One that I've seen, he got about 2 extra paragraphs. Because I don't know whether someone had said, "Oh, well, don't go into that much detail." But one of the things they mentioned on this letter was that the rods they put in, they were saying, well, they weren't carbon fiber, they were PVC. But PVC still is bigger. And they said, yeah, it was there to represent the props, but they're still bigger than the props. So it still doesn't really answer the key point of you put an additional foreign object in there. That
why didn't they just put the props in? Why couldn't they put the props in?
Precisely, that's the question.
And that block. You know, to me, that block is an aluminium block. You can hear it hit the metal as he lifts it up, and that is not in a drone. It's not. If that's meant to represent a battery,
that's what they say. I think that's what they would say. But yeah, they've just not addressed that at all in the letter. In fact, obviously everyone's written them different letters, and everyone's getting back the same response. So they've had a researcher do that early on, and thought, well, that this will cover all the points. Obviously, the researcher doesn't know too much about drone history, because if you're going to cite Balper in a reply, that's never ever going to get you're being completely unbiased in the subject matter, because, you know, that's like getting, as I've used the analogy before, it's like getting Greenpeace to do a unbiased, an unbiased evaluation of nuclear power. It's never going to happen.
And interestingly, you know, Philip Rose, they didn't reply to a single one of his technical questions. Philip responded again, and they've not done it for anyone. They're basically going, nothing to see here, move along. This is the response we're going to give you. So, yeah.
That's just, you know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s England, where the BBC was a very respected thing, and it's just disappointing, I suppose. It's the bottom line. Didn't expect it. If you're paying, you know, if you're having to pay, well, you are having to pay for the TV. The nation pays for that channel, so you'd expect that to be accurate. If it's your ITV or Channel 4 or whatever, I wouldn't be quite so, or Sky or whatever. I wouldn't be quite so worried about it. That's why they put Flipping the Sky on in newsrooms, because they always traditionally break stories before the BBC dares. But maybe that's not a thing anymore. I don't know.
I have to say I've looked at the BBC fundamentally different in the last 6 months than I ever have, and it's weird to be able to say I have quite a distaste for the organisation now, and I never had that. They brought some of the best telly programmes I grew up with. Probably many of us did on here, apart from Nicola. He doesn't know what I'm talking about, but But I do, I've sat down and watched telly, and I've actually thought, why am I watching the BBC? Because they're fundamentally against one of the things I love doing, and they're not even willing to discuss it, frankly.
One word, Jimmy Savile.
It's actually 2. I hear what you're saying.
Move along from that one.
I bet Nicola's a keen Doctor Who fan, so I bet he has seen the BBC.
I think the biggest mistake BBC have made is
he only watches Doctor Who these days to watch the anamorphic lens flares.
That's me.
I think the biggest mistake BBC made is they should have just turned around and done the right thing and apologised to the drone community.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I don't why they had to dig their heels in and say no. You know, we've done nothing wrong. Look at what Balber told us. You know, that's kind of like basically, you know, rubbing salt in the wounds as a response, really. You know, I think really, you know, they should have done the right thing, turned around and said, look, you know, we're sorry, we should have probably been a little bit more balanced in this. We'll bear it in mind for the next one, Britain's next Armageddon, and then and then sort of provided some pictures of some drones, you know, saving some people's lives.
And they're part of, and obviously this is very childish, and no drone user should do this at all. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Don't do it at all. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But Windfall Films, who did the production, given there's been no apology, some drone users have taken to giving them Google reviews and with 1 star. But obviously, don't do that at all. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Sure, someone messaged me about that. I don't know.
Obviously.
I heard that Google actually removed a lot of those reviews.
Yeah, they got rid of at least 30, but more drone users have been going on since. So they've still got now a nice rating of 1.5, which they thoroughly deserve.
That's interesting. So they've obviously kicked up, but yeah, that's interesting because if at some point Google must think, "Oh, hang on a minute, if they kicked up but people are still coming back, they probably must. The algorithm must start thinking, oh, maybe this has got to be what it really is."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they'll be looked at manually, and you can ask for them to be removed, but obviously it undermines Google's review system if they're deleting everything off that someone says, well, we don't like the reviews. Because at the end of the day, we have a right, from my viewpoint, we have a right because it's taxpayers' money. We've effectively paid for that production, and the research on it is poor. And I think we're allowed to say, as long as we keep it true and honest, that we're not happy with the research. It wasn't as good as it could have been. It's a fair comment, but other people will have a different view on that. But we've taken clickbait nonsense now for well over 4 years. I mean, I remember when the BBC had published Professor Dunn's statement that a drone in the US had killed, and I actually kicked up with the BBC, and I got that removed from the article and put the link to the Acro heli in New York. That's the death he was referring to. But since then, all we've got is continually is this clickbait, and we've just rolled over and taken it, and it's got to the point now that a lot less people win. And I think that's where we need to get to. We need to jump up and down. We need to shout. We need to be a bit more difficult about it because, frankly, we've rolled over and taken it for over 4 or 5 years, and it's got us absolutely nowhere. And then if production companies looking now and thinking this isn't a segment that we can so easily bully and not get it challenged back to us, maybe they will think twice. Fingers crossed.
You just mentioned that Professor Dunn, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, who is he? Because I've never heard of him before this select inquiry. Like there's a lot of professors that I've been in academia, and I know a lot of professors in the drone industry, but I've never heard of this guy. He seems to have sort of come out of nowhere.
Well, it was probably about I think it was 2015 House of Lords. I don't know how I got there. I just remember the story at the time because he'd gone to the House of Lords and he told them that drones, consumer drones as we fly, had already killed in the US. So he was trying to then scare the House of Lords. They were doing a committee on drones at that time. And that's the only time I've seen him, not seen him since. So I thought, oh, well, thankfully this guy clearly doesn't know his subject matter and has disappeared. And then when I saw that he was on this committee, it was days before someone posted online about it. I said, if this guy's there, it's not going to be good because he's misled. You can't get any more misleading than trying to look at an RC death and say that is a drone. If you genuinely believe that, it shows you don't know your subject matter. But you're thinking it's either that or he's genuinely trained a scaremonger. And I think that's really disappointing, because when someone has the name professor or doctor, people immediately assume this is somebody that's got a credible knowledge, and unfortunately, it's not the case.
So I'm guessing he's an expert of drones, and he's been studying drones his whole life, and has written lots and lots of papers on drone technology.
Absolutely not.
You mean to say he's not involved in drones at all?
I don't believe his background is in drones, but however it's come about, he's appointed himself a commentator with knowledge on the subject. But I think, didn't he say the only drones he's had is crashed? I didn't even watch it, because, to be honest, I knew what was going to happen. So I'd have been shouting at the TV. So I just read other people's comments on it, but I just thought, absolutely no surprise.
No, well, I was when he was banging on about the flipping all the reported air proxies. What about all the ones that haven't been reported? All those air misses that have happened that haven't been reported. What are you talking about, man? He's sort of suggesting that there's huge numbers of unreported air proxies every day. It must be so. It's like, what the hell are you saying? But I think we'll move on from, because we are banging BBC, but my takeaway is I didn't realise quite what parliamentary privilege meant. I didn't quite realise you could say whatever you like there, and no one will come and tell you off about it. And that's wrong. I'm naive. I didn't realise that's what was happening.
Well, I can give you an exclusive now. We were just talking about air proxies, and I can give you a little bit of an exclusive now, Gary.
Go ahead.
But RPAS have been arranging a meeting, which is now confirmed for the middle of September. I forget the exact date. It's about the 15th, 16th of September, with Steve Forward from the Airprox Board, director of the Airprox Board. We've got DJI have said that they'll come. We've got the guy from the Royal Aeronautical Society UAS Working Group. We've got Simon Dale, who said he would come as well. And then maybe one or two other parties still yet to be confirmed. But it's basically to talk about air proxies, talk about the data that lies underneath it, and then to see if we can, as a community, come up with any improvements to go and make the process more transparent and more accurate.
Very good. Very good. Well, stop using the word drone when it's unidentified. Isn't that basically what we'd like?
Yes.
Well, there we are. Done. Okay, right.
Simon said it was to follow their own guidelines. By their own guidelines, they should be reporting 80% less than they do now from that sample of 200 knots they've done at the recent air proxy. So as long as they follow their own guidelines and it's fair. I mean, if a drone genuinely has been seen by a pilot, no one's got any objection to that being recorded. But it's about having that data that can be trusted, because we know, unfortunately, the media will immediately jump on that and they will misrepresent it. So it needs to be.
But I think, again, to defend the Airprox people, they will be generating reports in the way that they've done for 50 years and using wording and phrasing that they've done in 50 years, and it's not been picked up and moved on. So hopefully the guys, the good folks from ARPAS, will just gently nudge them in a direction of, don't use these words so much, or consider how you write it.
I think they're very open to sort of reviewing it. They're very, very, very much open to it. And I know that Steve Forward's talking to Simon Dale at the moment, or they've got a meeting coming up as well. So I think the whole process is, it does need to be reviewed. It is what it is because of historical kind of context. Drones weren't around 10 years ago, so clearly, things have changed since then. They probably put a system in as soon as they started seeing drones around. They probably put a system in place to account for that. But now that we've got a better picture of what that looks like, and we've got more drones around, maybe that system isn't fit for purpose anymore. So I think he's very open to it, and it's all about using facts and evidence to sort of come up with a better solution. So positive news all round there. So
No, well done.
Not all doom and gloom, Gary.
Facts and evidence. Well, that'll never catch on. They'll never catch on in this industry. You know that. No, well done. No, that's very good. I'm really pleased that Simon's on board that. So his not so subtle nudging worked very well, I think, then. So well done, Simon, if you happen to be in the comments. What else we were going? Dual propeller drones fly twice as long as 4 propeller drones, you know. Have you all seen that story?
Yeah, I was looking at that. It's quite an interesting bit of kit, isn't it?
It's really good until you get a gust of wind and then you're buggered.
Well, coaxial propellers in a biscuit tin.
They've reinvented the coaxial helicopter with the rotor shroud. I mean, patent it now while you can. No prior art there, but yeah, as pointed out, the side area is just going to be useless in the wind.
Yeah,
and, you're better off with a coaxial helicopter.
Well, so if we're in indoors industrial inspection, isn't it? Because that's actually a guard to stop things flying in there. But yeah, there's some pretty wild sort of claims in there of modern.
When the guy started off by saying this was pretty unique, obviously,
yeah, I know.
Doesn't even understand the English language.
Hang on a minute.
But if you look, you know, if it's an indoor drone, what's the big one? The flyability is
don't get a biscuit tin.
You know, the flyability is the big indoor one, isn't it? The what's it called? The I can't remember what it's actually called. The Elos or
Elios or whatever it is. Yeah.
You know, if you look, okay, you're going to fly a biscuit tin and it won't go down the pipe, or you're going to fly it into a wall and it won't go any further. It's an interesting design, but it's like trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist. That's the problem, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I think there is a problem.
I've had the ones that's like a basketball with carbon fiber rods.
Yes, that's the Elios. Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
And there's 2 versions. The original version, the cage rotated, and they've actually now fixed the cage on the version 2 to the drone. It doesn't move at all because they felt the rotating cage wasn't necessary. It just bounces off whatever it hits, basically.
But don't get me wrong. I think the coax design is actually quite a clever design, because the problem is with these Elios type aircraft where you've got these 4 little tiny propellers. We all know that little tiny propellers are really inefficient. How many minutes do you get with an Elios? What, 7 or 8 minutes?
Flight time?
They tether, don't they? They
5
tether
minutes. 5 minutes if you actually want to go and get the aircraft back to the landing point without ending up having to crawl into the area you're trying to avoid crawling in the first place.
To get it out.
But you like, don't get me wrong, it's a brilliant aircraft, but in terms of efficiency and designing an aircraft that's optimal, you want big propellers. So the coax big propeller design is actually, I think there's legs in it. It's just a case of getting that controllability right. And I don't know. I don't really know enough about this design to sort of judge it fairly, but from what it looks a little bit like a flying lampshade.
Yes.
What's wrong with the helium lift envelope and little motors just to move you around, and then you can start virtually as long as you like?
That's also true. Yes, if you're in a windless environment. Yeah. Well, I just thought I thought the obvious thing was. Half the motors, twice the duration. It's like, well, yeah. Often. Like,
physics still works.
Yeah. And Mitchell, I think it is like this. I think it's coaxial like this is how it's done. But probably with teetering heads, I think that's probably what it's got. Lead lag heads.
Is it not sort of vector thrust?
No, I think I think it'll be teetering head. Whereas this, you would have to use vanes to do the thrust vectoring.
So it's basically a helicopter with a shroud around it. But now instead of having like one rotor head as a point of failure, you've now got 2 rotor heads, which are single points of failure.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other thing is, if you get twice as long with just 2 rotors, why don't they just make a helicopter and get 4 times as long?
Damn you and your common sense.
He's always pushing helicopters. The thing,
he went away.
Some of the early UAVs as such, were actually a motor, a propeller in a tube with offset vanes at the bottom to counter the torque, and that's how they flew. So we're going full circle, are we?
Yeah. It wasn't quite as new as the headline and just keep stacking propellers. Exactly, it's got to be better.
I knew it was fake when I couldn't see any 3D renderings.
Yeah, exactly. You'll never fly without a proper 3D rendering. Now, and an interesting aside. I think it's interesting. If you're into ham radio, it's interesting because the 2-meter band is under threat. It's going away. It's the French. You can blame the French. They want it gone. They want it to turn it into an aeronautical mobile frequency because the problem we've got with airline is when you're at 30,000 feet, you can be here miles away. So they do need lots and lots of channels, and they're running out of them. Even
they got the GPS with it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, even with 8.33 spacing now, they're running out. I think it's about 30 megs, isn't it? But 118 through to 135 and 20 megs, whatever it is, of bandwidth they've got on VHF. Now they want 2 meters as well. The French said that would be a good idea, and they're going for it. Already a lot of paraglider guys and microlight guys use it illegally anyway. But to me, it strikes me two things of interest. They mentioned UAS in it, and why on earth are airband communications still AM in the VHF band? I mean, there's quite wide band stuff.
How aviation works, Gary. You don't understand how this aviation system works and how it before something can actually be sold, it has to have gone through this 35-year certification process, so it's already way out of date before it even hits the market. And then to get a new product out, the lead times are so long. We all know how it works. That's the problem. It's interesting that the ham radio community doesn't seem to be kicking back much, and I think that's probably because the 2-meter band has always been the technician's band. It's the band that you can set a really easy license for, and you buy stuff off the shop and you plug it in and you just go. It's a bit like the old, it's just like step up from CB radio. And I think a lot of the people that might have been doing that in the past have moved on to using the internet, whereas the real dyed-in-the-wool hams they're 80 meters with Morse code and RTTY. They're the real hardcore.
Yeah, but the reality of that is that on 2 meters and more likely on 70 SEMs, they're using all the digital D-Star and all that sort of stuff, which is a digital multi-channel, drops into the internet, goes anywhere in the world, sort of thing that would be really useful in aviation, for instance. So they're already years ahead.
2 meters I never really got it. I spent a bit of time with an 18-foot Yagi in the garden with an SSB set on 27 megs on a part of SEPT I shouldn't have been on, and I used to love pulling a VFO up a few megs to allow me to get to somewhere I shouldn't be, but that was fun. It was about being able to do it. 2 meters was always a bit why, just why.
The fun was building repeaters and putting repeater networks up. That's the real fun in 2 meters. But when Giants have done that a couple of times, it gets old.
Yeah, it's
well, all right then. Well, then they don't need it.
Take it off.
But it was mentioned. RPAS were mentioned, and when I was really paying attention to the World Radio Council, they were always talking above 7 gigs. Is what they're talking about. So we've said before, we need bandwidth, we need protected spectrum, and perhaps we're beginning to see that door starting to open. Maybe.
But 2 meters is still quite, looking at antennas and things like that, quarter wave antenna at 2 meters, what's it, 500 mils? It's all pretty big. We like the smaller antennas and the higher frequencies because they fit our smaller craft far more effectively. Yeah,
no, absolutely. But it does beg the question: why isn't modern aviation secure digital transmissions? Then they'd have 20 or 30 gigs worth of space. We'll give them loads of room for stuff. Then
come on.
I remember about 8 or 9 years ago, there was a talk about uniforming all of the countries and having a dedicated band for drones. What happened to that conversation? Like that was a huge thing back in the days, and it just died a death.
Well, no, it keeps getting mentioned at the World Radio Council, but I suspect Bruce will probably know more than me, but I suspect there are special interest groups in the satellite bands up in the 7s and stuff above that, the military, that aren't all that interested in people suddenly joining the party and having access to 7 gigs antennas and all the other stuff. There'll be a hop and a skip away from it. It'll be something to do with that.
Also, the spectrum is a finite resource, and it's
exactly,
crowded.
yes.
The spectrum, they're not getting more of it. So.
Yeah.
Surely there must be like one band that every country can adhere to, or at least like 2 bands. You know, okay, we'll say the West will use one and China and Russia will use another, as an example. Like, you know, surely there is a way of uniforming this and creating something that's suitable. I don't know whether there's lobbying going on by particular manufacturers that want to stick to the current bands that they're on. I don't know, but you know, we do need to sort of have a dedicated band for drones so that we can essentially start getting sort of large distances. Because at the moment, you know, we've got 2.4, 5.8. That's great for line of sight, but as soon as you want to start doing Amazon delivery, like what are we going to use? At the moment, we're talking about 5G being
and that'll never be allowed.
Nicola, chime in, Nicola. How do you go beyond visual line of sight? What frequency do you use?
5.8, 2.4, and 868 megahertz.
But what kind of distances are you getting?
Well,
it's a dangerous question, that.
So line of sight, I've been out to about 27 kilometers. Just putting that out there so it's known it's line of sight.
Those anamorphic lenses are fantastic.
Absolutely, it's got a really big pair of binoculars.
Yeah. Built in, yeah.
Yeah, but that's with altitude, isn't it? That wouldn't actually fit the delivery model, because you're climbing as you go. The delivery model is that the thing is near the surface.
Well, no. That's line of sight and within 400 feet above the ground.
Okay.
You know, because of the length of the aircraft, it looks a few kilometers, but actually no, it's just too wide of a lens.
What kind of aircraft are you flying? It's like 737s or something?
Nah.
No.
It's the XUAV Clouds, the Believer, the Crosswind. Wow, it was still not lost. But it could go longer. Actually, it could go longer. The 27 kilometers are quite far from the limit of the 868 megahertz system. It can go a lot longer.
So your 868.
I may or may not know of somebody, apparently, allegedly, that has flown in with comms links a distance of 80 kilometers to a mapping task, done the mapping task for an hour, and returned home in time for tea and medals. Perhaps, maybe. So yeah, but at the end of the day, we do need protected spectrum for BV loss.
This is the problem with the high frequencies, though. If you're going into the gigahertz range, you do have actual line of sight. You have to be able to see the model. It doesn't follow the curve of the Earth. So and below, with those frequencies that will actually extend beyond the horizon, that part of the spectrum is so totally allocated that we really are stuck with what we've got. The other thing is, there's a cost to pay or a price to pay if you want to get specifically allocated spectrum. We're using ISM bands. They're free, no licensing fees, but if you start using a band that's dedicated to that, you can be sure that the government's going to step in and say, well, that's going to cost just $6,000 a year for an allocation on this band. And the market is very price sensitive.
Well, it's a good job the Earth is flat then, Bruce. You know, line of sight shouldn't be a problem. You know, 80 kilometers, you know, you'll see that no problem at all. Clearly.
But you know, there's a lot. Well, again, a friend of mine may have just today finished mapping 150 square miles, and he did it in 2 days with a fixed wing platform. So it's being done, not in Europe, obviously, but it's being done, and it can be done. It's not all that hard with modern reliable systems that are out there. But we do need protected spectrum moving forward, and Bruce has hit the nail on the head. Probably the delay is they're working out the fee structure. They'll take years. That's what they'll take, years and years and years to work out exactly what the money should be. So, Nicola, you haven't found your plane? No.
No, not yet. And this weekend I'll actually be flying. Well, so far the plan is to be flying outside of the city, so I won't be able to fly up to the mountain. But at least I'm gonna get some other very important work done.
Did you open the only important work for you to do now is open that box? Have you not
Actually,
even
more important is to finish some stuff I'm already working on, so I can clear up some space on my computer, so I can actually put the materials for that thing that I'm supposed to be opening.
Well, but I'm keen to know if it really does have all the VTOL stuff in it with the 3 different designs on the box. It's like, well, how can they have all those different options?
Well, I seriously doubt that.
Yeah,
Not at that price. Probably that's an option if you order it from the factory. Probably that could be an option if you order it from the factory with that thing, because the design of the plane assumingly supports that easier than something else, and they've actually created this kit from the factory. It's not an aftermarket thing like with all the other planes. But I seriously doubt that's included in here. I think if that was the case, this would have cost at least 2 times more.
well, it's only some bits of carbon rod or PVC, depending on who you believe. Mitch, you're saying you don't want to pay for satellite data links. Yeah, that is the other option, and they are beginning to become a thing, aren't they, as well? That's the other 5G sort of one. But the bottom line is our aviation authorities going to accept these satellite data links and 5G? Because again, as Bruce has said, it'll take 35 years to get whatever that is approved. Yeah.
And satellite systems have these single point of failure, so where's the redundancy?
You can use satellites as long as the ground station isn't in Italy. Yeah. But
Mind you, in Italy it was run by Alfa Romeo. In the UK, did Lucas run it? Because then it would have failed anyway.
Yes. Well, I mean, but we're just going to get a bit cleverer using modern data methods over the air. There are some pretty clever systems out there right now.
Mesh networks. One thing that I've seen done, and I was thinking of doing it myself some stage, is you set up, you station aircraft in loiter mode along your intended flight path, and you then run a relay in your mesh network, and you can go an awfully long way for an awfully long time using current frequencies.
Well, even a hill, you have a persistent hill nearby. We'll do exactly the same thing. Oh, hello, Ash. How are you doing? You're coming in late on our moaning. Oh, we're 9 minutes. Look at that. We're 9 minutes over the hour without even trying. I bet I say, has anyone else seen anything else? Horrors.
Yeah,
I have.
Oh, go on.
Go, Ian. You go first.
I was just going to mention this week the new orange and yellow cubes have landed from Profi. The black is coming to an end, and the way forward now with the cube autopilot is going to be the orange for most users. They're in betas, but they are at dealers. My dealer sent me a message this morning to say they've arrived. So
your dealer sent you a message.
He's a good guy, but yeah. So Philip is they've sneaked out, because he hasn't mentioned this on any of the groups either, but he sneaked out the orange and the yellow version of the cube now. So I'm hoping to get my hands on them very, very shortly.
So how does the orange differ from the black? Okay,
so the orange is a H7 CPU. It's got a lot more RAM. It's got 1 meg of RAM instead of 256 megabits off the top of my head. Entirely new processor, more RAM. The words Philip used was there's certain bits of the black that are basically coming towards end of life. So they're going to start holding them back for commercial customers, and they're going to drive the orange as the cube to go for general customers. Now, the yellow actually sits below the orange in spec. And I messaged Philip, funny enough, on the group to ask him what the difference was, and it's using an F7 instead of a H. And the basics are that for PX4 users, they're going to want the yellow cube because it won't support the processor on the orange. So they've got two versions to cater for both markets, but they're looking to be quite aggressive on the pricing of the orange. He really is pricing it well.
Is he gonna put the ADSB in on the carrier boards for those?
That's on the carrier board.
Same
So
carrier
yeah,
board, isn't it? Yeah.
So you'll be able to get the orange cube with the ADSB carrier board. Yeah.
And
So orange
the
is the new black.
Yeah, orange is the new black.
the new black, and that's how I did it.
Are there any of the big manufacturers using the cube yet in their aircraft?
Free Fly are using it in the new Alta. You know that
Boeing are using it in their stuff. AeroVironment are using it in that city tail sitter thing. There's a few of them.
Should have been in that bloody racing car, quite frankly. That was flying around, but it looks like they were using something out of a Wii controller. That's probably me being a little bit unkind, but the adoption is coming for the Cube. The reality is, the big manufacturers are pretty much out of the flight controller market now. DJI, it's not, they still make the A3, but it's not really designed for anything outside of their own ecosystem. And the only other, in my opinion, solution that's worth a look is the Cube from Profi. Yes, there are thousands of Chinese ones out there. If you think I'm going to spend 20,000 building an aircraft and put a controller from one of the companies that don't offer any support in there, it's just not going to happen. It's as simple as that.
Ash is mentioning a video. Please, Ash, put a link into the comments. I have seen that. Well, I'll send you an email. Maybe you'd like to join us and talk to us a couple of minutes, a second about Ash. But yeah, I've seen. Have we seen that firework video?
Is that the Phantom?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
To be honest, that's nothing new in that it's been done going back years out, putting firework on a drone and firing it. So it's kind of a copycat thing. But first place I saw that done was a video from Doncaster. So I think Doncaster has the accolade there of first clowning around with them. But yeah, you know my thoughts on fireworks anyway. Ban them. That's the cause issue. Get rid of them. Problem solved.
Yeah. I think they're generally are moving that way, aren't they? But I think it's the way that's being framed, because the way the story. I haven't seen Ash's video, but the way the story seems to change depending on which news source you read. Some people say he's an annoyed neighbour. Some people's this. Some people's that. No, it's not good. It's not good. Sorry. Anyway. Ian, sorry, I stopped you.
No, so that's the only thing. It's good. It's still in beta, so it's not for official use yet. As all things. Last week we had obviously Hearlink's been certified, so it's got its CE and its FCC now as well. So yeah, hopefully going to get them in the next week and have a play.
Oh, very good, very good.
So Android is almost up and running, or is already up and running? Would you say?
Android, sorry.
Yeah, the Android.
The Hearlink system.
Cube being Android of the drone market.
Oh yeah. It's the reality is it is as close to plug and play as there is out there at the moment, and the HD Link system with Hearlink gives you a all-in-one solution that we haven't been able to get from anyone else. No one else has put it together where you can go out and get an RC with a control link, you can get a flight controller, very easily bolt them together and get a good out-the-box experience. And there are thousands of people who will disagree. There are thousands of Ardra capable flight controllers out there, but it's not about the flight controller. If you take the NASA, what was so good about the NASA from DJI was the out-the-box experience. Build it, bolt it on a frame, it pretty much flew decent out the box. Most people are not super technical savvy. They just want to be able to build themselves something that gets them in the air. And the guys, they're doing a fantastic job. I got 3 of them, and they're great. They're great controllers.
I think we're just waiting for that breakthrough product to come through in the drone market, where you have a drone which is built around the Cube. and is using all of the software on board that the cube device. And I think we'll start seeing some challenges to the likes of DJI. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see sort of, DJI are great, they've got a fantastic product, but they do need a little bit of competition. And I think a cube enabled drone, which ticks all the boxes, could potentially be it. But I've not seen it yet. But how long is it going to take until we see it?
What do you think, Ian? What do we need? We need a gimbal. We keep saying it. We want a gimbal. We want a gimbal. We want a camera gimbal.
If you
every week, so who knows?
But you're sort of assuming that you're talking multi-rotors, though, aren't you? Yes. Because if you look at the fixed wing world, then the Cube and RG-plane has it.
Yeah,
totally. There's no. There are far more aircraft mapping using RG-plane than there are SenseFly EBs out there by a considerable number. And this one we mate used yesterday, the last 2 days to 150 square miles, RG-plane in a Believer. And it's just so, flying for 5 hours at a time. You 6 hours. Once we get to 6 hours flight time, then that's your practical usable daylight for photogrammetry. And we're there. And then there's not much more you can do until you have your next size of platform, which is your LiDAR platform that's big enough and safe enough and whatever. But then that's a different kettle of ball games altogether, because that probably end up being a really big BVLOS system.
Is there an RTK module for it yet? Like a proper one, a dual frequency?
They've got their own, but I've not tried it. It is RTK, but I don't think it's L1 and L2. I could be wrong on that. You know what? I don't take my word on that one 100%. They've got the new Here 2 GPS. They've got the new Here Pro, which in itself is a flight controller. There's enough sensors on the Here Pro in itself to fly an aircraft, let alone having that attached to it as well. So
yeah, that's right, there is, yes. But also you hit another point here though, James, I think, and that is that if someone rushes out and buys RTK set up for their Phantom or whatever it is, that doesn't absolve them from having the experience, skills and knowledge that a surveyor has and somebody that can use the gear. You can get all the bits, you can get every letter of the alphabet you like flying in the air, but your data might very well still be crap if you don't know what you're doing with it. So you know that again, you're saying the right words for professional people.
Very true. But I think those things will slowly be automated. I think you will get to a point where, at least for basic surveys, it will just be, press a button and wait for it to land. There's no reason why that can't happen. And even when you're looking at sort of vertical objects in a survey area, like a lot of drone surveys are just like downward looking images, nadir images. But actually, if you just angle the camera up and you do the Pix 4D equivalent of what they call a double grid survey, where you basically fly in sort of, you basically fly two flight paths which are normal to each other. You angle the camera upwards by 30 degrees or whatever. You basically and then you do a nadir survey as well. Yes, it takes you 3 times as long to do it, but actually you've got survey grade data for the whole area. You RTK that thing and you suddenly got a 1 to 200 topo survey for any area you want. And to be honest, the flight time isn't the issue. For surveyors, the flight time is not the issue. That's not the thing holding it back. The thing that's holding it back is repeatable, reliable, accurate data. And if you can crack that and you can automate that, I think you're onto a gold mine. So whoever does that first, give me some money because I gave you the idea.
The thing to understand really with the Cube, and I think Ian probably knows where I'm coming from on this, is if you were going to manufacture an aircraft today, there is no need to waste any time on the flight control aspect. If you were going to produce an aircraft into the market, and just like the speed speeder. You know, why put the development time into something that's been done and done extremely well? And that's where the guys at Profi are doing a good job, because they've produced something and manufacturers are starting to pick it up. You know, it's modular. They can plug it into their airframes, free fly. Others, they're starting to put it into their aircraft. So whilst it might not always be the cheapest compared for other builders, it's allowing manufacturers to actually come on board without spending huge amounts of time messing around with the flight control side of it.
Yeah, and if I was doing a serious drone, what I'd be really be doing is I'd be getting Cube, and then I would be hiring developers and Pilot and getting them to fix bugs, improve the software. I think that's a principled right thing to do. In the you add value back to something that you're getting effectively, or this development for free, which has been done over several years, and it's required all the data from people crashing and so on to go in to make all the redundancy and all the software safeguards. But I also think it's a responsible thing to do if you're operating something commercially with it. Don't just leave it to the whole open source community. Get in there and get your hands dirty, adding some improvement to it yourself.
How much input do Cube have in the development of the RG-Pilot code? Is there any kind of feedback going on there? Because you'd think if they're making the money off this hardware, there's some benefit in them making sure that software is really good as well.
They don't really make money off the hardware, although I have a feeling they do contribute something per sale, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the idea is they can't show preference to one manufacturer over another. So I think everyone gets, even people that are cloning stuff and aren't actually contributing from a hardware viewpoint, I think still get treated equally as everyone else. I think that the problem you have with open source software is if you're a developer giving up your own time, it's far more interesting to be coding new funky features or new technology than it is to be looking at, old bugs that are maybe low priority and fixing them. But it's still important to do that. So that's where I would see benefit of people that use it commercially to help improve the overall standard.
Yeah, I know. That's a question only Philip can really answer. I believe, as Ian said, I'm sure at one point there was feedback off each sale. I remember seeing a post about that at some point. I don't know if that's still the case. What you do see is there is a clear communication path back and forth between RG-Pilot and the Cube, the guys at Profi. That's constant back and forth. I think it is complex because there will be parts of the RG-Pilot community who don't want to tie to one single bit of hardware. There are parts that would rather go to one bit of hardware. They are symbiotic in the sense of one needs the other. The Cube doesn't support PX4 officially, as I understand it. The official support is RG-Pilot, so that's where Philip tells everyone to, that's where the recommendation to go is. The problem is with these things is you're not getting something where you're out the box going to get consumer level support like you would from a mass manufacturer. There is a level of you have to figure some of this stuff out for yourself as well, and you're paying the price you're paying because of that, because at the end of the day you're getting absolutely outstanding hardware but at a cost which is much less than if you had to have a full customer service organization behind it. You have the community behind it who will help you and support you, but there is parts of it you have to do on your own as well.
Yeah.
Don't forget there's sort of a lead-in path now because of the Tebios build.
Yes,
it allows the RG-Pilot code or RG-Plane, and of course what you also have to remember, it's not just RG-Pilot, it's RG-Boat, it's RG-Rover, it's RG-Copter, it's RG-traditional helicopter, it's submarines, it's all manner of things, but you can run it on cheap boards, cheap F4 boards, and dabble and play, have a little experiment, and then move on up to the more expensive hardware, if you will. So that's another thing that the project made was to support so many boards, and that is a nightmare because at the end of the day, supporting one board would be the easiest thing to do.
This is interesting. You said that, Ian, about that there isn't that level of support there. For me, I kind of see that as an opportunity for a company to come in there and swoop up that market, in terms of providing that, out of the box solution with the PX4 as its brain.
Yeah, and that's where the dealer comes in, and frankly, that's where Philip provides a massive amount on his website. I'm on there a lot myself, and I answer what I can answer. He answers loads. All the community does. But the overriding fact is, if you've got a fundamental issue, you speak to your dealer, and that's where they've built this dealer network up, who are hugely knowledgeable. All of the dealers I've dealt with around this stuff, they really know their stuff. Ian knows 3DXR in the UK. Ben, he's forgot more than I know, put it that way. And but there is always a case of you have to be able to understand the basic concepts, but there is always someone who will walk you through it. If it isn't them, if you went on ardropilot.org, there is someone there who will spend the time walking you through it. It doesn't matter if it's a 15 quid race control flight controller or it's one of these. Someone will help you get up and running.
I think Cube is still a business to business type company. We still don't really have apart from those manufacturers you mentioned earlier, we still don't have any real multi-rotor, business to customer type organizations out there, which will sell you a product where you can pull it out of the box and it'll be nice and shiny. You press the go button and it will take off and do its thing. And I think that will come. Basically a DJI Phantom for the Cube. I think that's what's still missing to make that mainstream within the multi-rotor world, at least. And I've not really been following the fixed wing market for a while, to be fair, but it sounds like it's kind of making its legs within that market already. And I think that needs to happen in the multi-rotor world as well, for us to go and see real massive adoption of the Cube as a genuine competitor to the likes of DJI.
See that? Well, that's where it started, because the Cube was the flight controller in the 3DR Solo, so that's how it became a product. Albeit it's evolved since then, and that's just the problem at the moment with anyone trying to make an RTF. It's competing against DJI and the fact they can operate at such low margins compared to everyone else.
If I look at every other flight controller, the one thing that's let them down is the software, apart from one. And if you look at all of the Tarat made one, software was horrendous. GE's made one, again, was a complete nightmare. The only one that I've had which is equal, in my opinion, to everything else has been the Vector from Eagletree. Those guys do a really good job with their flight controllers in the fixed wing, but everything else that's been a company trying to do hardware and software, apart from DJI, have struggled. And Ardropilot has found this hole where you've got the software on one side and you've got the hardware on another, and the two together can produce this fantastic package.
And Wilson's just mentioned in the comments thoughts on the newer racing controllers using H7 processors. I think I'm right in saying that Chibios runs faster on an F4 than a lot of the other codes. So it's all very well having an H7 processor in the thing, but the code's got to be optimized as well. It's pretty. We need to call the man and get him on it, but it's pretty fast. So the code runs. Chibios is the fastest flight controller code out there.
Yeah, when they moved, just take the Cube Black under PX4. Oh, NutX Flight Stack, it could only run a single EKF or two EKFs, I think it was. When they moved to Chibios, they were able to go up to full 3 IMU EKFs in the background with no hardware change, purely because of the resources that were available. Now, you're saying about H7s, the new Cube Orange is H7. So you've already had Chibios, which is massively improved it, and now we're going to be chucking that into a processor which is dramatically faster, 400 megs on the Orange, and with a mega RAM.
But that's all been done to enable us to of course mine for Bruce chain while in the down cycles when it's not doing anything else. That's all for Bruce chain mining.
I think like the thing is like we've you know, I think the argument about, you know, it's a race to the bottom. A cube powered multi-rotor cannot compete with a Phantom 4. Completely understand that argument, but I don't think it has to. I think trying to compete with a Phantom 4 is in its own little genre. And actually, when you look at sort of industrial use cases, the Phantom 4 is certainly limited. Like to produce a 1 to 200 topographical survey, which any surveyor or engineer or construction person will have to do, you have to fly around about 20 meters in flying height. But you've got trees which are 20 meters tall, so you end up basically flying into the top of trees. Whereas with something like a Falcon 8, you're up at about 40, 45 meters, which are well away from things. And it's actually, when you're looking in that market for surveying, there's only really two reasonable options you've got there within the sort of low mass category, which is the M200 and the Falcon 8. They're the only two real options out there. And you know, I think there is a gap there for an aircraft, a survey aircraft, PPK or RTK enabled, powered on the cube, at around about the £12,000 mark.
Yep.
I think that there would be people who would buy that. I know if there was a solution like that on the market for me, I would buy it, definitely.
Is the Falcon 8 not dead? I thought that had finished.
No, still alive. It's
Yeah.
Falcon 8 Plus.
Plus, yeah. It's got a plus now.
Yeah, well, they were hoping to go and put. They said they were going to have an RTK payload on it, but then it never happened, which is a shame because I think that would have really given them some advantages there. But without that RTK payload, it really has dented their sort of competitive edge with regards to that. So they're going to have to come up with a pretty competitive Falcon 8 plus 2 or whatever it's going to be for it to be able to compete in this market again. And I think
getting quite long in the tooth now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you look at the M200. The M200 weighs what, 7-8 kilos. You don't need a 7 or 8 kilo machine flying around in a congested area to carry a 700 or 800 gram camera. You do not need something that kind of weight to be able to do that. Somewhere around maybe the 3.9-4 kilo mark, maybe, Gary, would be a quite a good solution. 3.9 kilos, carrying a DSLR camera, powering a cube with RTK or PPK, and I think you're on the money.
We've got an A7R or something like that for the camera.
Yeah, exactly. Dual batteries, 6 rotors, something like that. And I think surveyors will eat that like cake.
Yeah, I think we're talking commercial products. Fair enough. I was having my consumer hat on then. I think really, James, you should speak to 3DXR. They're quite switched on, just to see if you said these are my requirements, what could you do that for? And just find out, even out of curiosity, what that would cost to custom build using those open source components.
No, I think I've seen it for about 2 years. There's been a gap in the market for about 2 years. I've been looking for the right aircraft and I've not seen it. So
and then once you set it up with Mission Planner, so you set it up with Mission Planner, do all your flight testing and all that sort of stuff, you can then use for your day-to-day work Q ground control, which is a much more sort of friendly looking interface, if you will, for your surveyors to grid out the maps and all that sort of thing. And you can even skin that to your own personal liking.
Yep.
Just thinking out loud, Gary, why not for next week's show invite the guys on from 3DXR?
All right, yeah.
This conversation with James. Since I've hijacked it with Anamorphic today.
Get Ben on, yeah.
Well, all right. Well, if you chaps know him, then I shall leave that in your capable hands to get him along, and we shall do that.
Yeah,
Sorry?
I'll have a,
Yeah,
I'll have a chat with Ben in the week. Leave it with me.
Yeah, well, and then James can say, "Build me this," and he can tell us how much, and that'll be grand.
Maybe your show can turn into a weekly video, a weekly vlog of the build of this aircraft. So in about 10 years,
we won't give him more than a week. We won't give him more than a week. Goodness me. Goodness me. Now, Bruce, you had something to say. What did you have to say, Bruce? Over.
Sorry, Bruce.
Open Sky. That's Alphabet's getting into the UTM market with their app. They're going to take over. Altitude Angel's dead. Air Maps by the by. Google's getting involved. There goes the rest of the market. But actually, seriously, what they've done is I think they've used the Kazaa API and produced a quick little app, and the media has got hold of this, and they're probably testing the waters. I don't see them being a big player in the UTM market at this stage because there are too many entrenched players. And also, Google has this habit of coming up with new products and putting a bit of effort into them and then just dropping them like a wet sponge. So I don't think that's going to happen much. But
I wonder if Oz by Drone's still with us in the comments, because that's from what I understand, Kazaa sort of walked away from doing that and setting up an app, and Google have filled the gap. And from what I understand, they are saying, well, of course, all your model airplane chaps will only be flying from your registered fields, won't you? And we'd really like all the airspace up to 1,000 feet, please. And it's
Canberra, basically
a bit of a stitch-up job.
Big chunks of it. The other thing I wanted to get before I forget is, don't forget 50th anniversary of the moon landing before the next episode of Drone Sundry. And so we all remember that moment. You know, it's like when Kennedy got shot. What were you doing when they landed on the moon? And it's 50 years.
I'm a bit worried as to what he's actually going to say he was doing. I'm a bit worried.
No, nothing like that. It makes you feel old, doesn't it? 50 years ago, we put a man on the moon, and we haven't been back for 40-something years. So, obviously, a very boring place.
But just
who's this Kennedy guy, Bruce?
Book your air travel to Nevada for September for the Area 51 storming.
Now, I've missed this whole thing because my wife goes to me. I've been away most of the week, and I come back, and it was like, what's happening with Area 51? And I'm like, what? There's something happening with Area 51? Someone explain it to me.
There's this social media thing started off where I think hundreds of thousands of people have said that they're all going to basically charge the plane, and there'll be too many people for them to shoot. So they'll be able to get in there and see the aliens. There was one good post by a guy. He's going to turn up in a Halo suit, and he did a meme, which was him arriving there in a Halo suit. And he says, "This is how I'm going to arrive, and this is how I'm going to leave." It was him in a spaceship.
I've heard that since drones have come along, there's not been hardly any UFO sightings around Area 51.
It's a stale, Mitchell Roberts says it's a stale meme that caught on when it was already stale 2 weeks ago, and M. Wilson saying they can't stop all of us. Quite. You go, well, if you do, and hopefully it'll happen on a Tuesday, and they'll be to call in and tell us what's going on. But no, I've seen their little pictures like this battalion from the north, this from the west, and whatever, and Did
you see the fake Elon Musk post someone put on Twitter? There was a fake one of Elon Musk saying that if you spell, is it Neil Armstrong or one Neil back as this alien, isn't it? Whichever one it is. And he said he must have been on the moon, and there's a text from the FBI at the bottom saying, "Get it the fuck off."
It's quite mad. Will anyone turn up? I wonder. I don't know. I wonder if we can put a bet on at the bookies.
It would be funny, wouldn't it? It would be funny if 5,000 people turned up at the gate with pitchforks.
I think Extinction Rebellion should turn up and just fly drones over Area 51. That would do the same thing.
Absolutely. I'm not sure.
I think announcing it publicly, a month or two in advance really makes it useless, because they can easily move out everything out of that.
the thing is, if these people had a clue, if I was in charge of the thing, I'd say, right, excellent. Let's open up the doors. Let's have guided tours, $5 a head. In you come. We'll show you all the stuff and debunk all the myths. And because we'll put all the alien ships in the garage out the back. But I mean, just turn it into an open day for the Area 51, and they can make some money out of it. And people will go away saying, "Oh, that was great." Just turn it into a PR. Spin it.
The problem with Extinction Rebellion is if they had to go over to Area 51, they'd have to sail over because they wouldn't be able to use air transport.
Yeah, make them swim. Make them swim.
Louis come back. It's like he's time travelled. Hey, Louis been off to Area 51, but he's got the time travel bit wrong, and he's come back too late. We were talking about, Louis, that new coaxial helicopter. Have you got any thoughts about that before we all go?
No, it's just another architecture of helicopter, well known. There's also commercial products that are already being sold by some ArduPilot partners that are running ArduPilot. So it's just another model.
Isn't it? At the end of the day. Yeah. Well, look, we're just doing our finished bit. So, were there any stories that did catch your eye this week, Louis, that you wanted to talk about?
No. I was looking at the agenda that you sent. Glad I skipped Gatwick and all the English airports again.
Yeah, well, we've decided that that it will be, James, thought when we're on program number 8,000, we'll still be talking about Gatwick. It's probably about right.
Perhaps we should start talking about Jane Bond instead of James Bond.
That might be, mightn't it? Yes.
Well, we've got on to aliens now. Are you storming Area 51, Louis?
I've stormed Area 51 and 52 and Windows updates and mandatory reboots and nothing to do with Windows update. But that's not from Area 51. It's more from Redmond. So it's okay. It's another Area 51, although not recognized yet.
And you've been in China. Tell us what China was like.
Impressive. Those guys aren't playing. They have the means, they have the will, and they have the money. So they're not playing with this. They're doing this in a very professional way. And come on, guys, you enter on a shopping mall that is 2 kilometers long, 8 stories high, and you can build anything there. From an iPhone, you can build an iPhone buying all the parts. So it's absolutely mind-blowing for us in Europe to go to such a place. It's if they want, they can take over DJI has already taken over of the commercial drone side, but they have the way.
You were talking at what was the conference?
The World UAV Conference, and my talk was about building commercial/industrial solutions with ArduPilot. Well, there's lots of questions about using ArduPilot for industrial commercial products, and it's not that hard, and there are several ways to do it. The licensing of ArduPilot, which is something that people keep showing at ArduPilot, it's not an obstacle to that. So that was my talk.
And because James wants a 4-kilo A7R lifting 2-batteried multi-rotor, so you'd be able to go and just walk through that mall and build one for him
with PPK.
With
PPK, yes, why not? And you can also have the RTK, scanning LiDAR, or you can also go and have one of these vision real sense cameras from Intel.
Is that the new one, Louis?
Is this going to be held together with duct tape?
No, that's they're both new.
They got a new one now, haven't they?
It's this one. The one.
Yes.
This is impressive. This small T265 is very impressive.
So can you with the cube, can you actually integrate sort of collision avoidance bumpers onto it now?
On any of them?
On Autopilot,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Autopilot, you can. I've been doing some testing on this one, which is similar to the Cube, but it's an F7 CPU inside. It's a CUAV V5, and you can integrate that, or you can just make it easy. And while you wait for us to officially support collision avoidance, is already supported, but you don't want only collision avoidance. You also want VSLAM and path planning. So that's.
It sounds like all of the ingredients are there. There or thereabouts.
Yes, they are. We've been discussing with Intel to have a better interface on this one to integrate easily, because it has a USB 3 port, and there's not an easy way to connect this to a flight controller, but it's very easy to connect it, for instance, to, let me get it here, to a companion computer that can be a Raspberry Pi or an Intel i7 CPU like this one. So it's a matter of what you want to do with this collision avoidance and path planning.
I think there is going to be a little bit of a sea change in the way the business is done, as it were, with companion computers.
Yes, that's one of the ways.
You've got the flying part, and then you've got the bit that does your survey, does your getting out of the way of stuff. And I think at that point, RG Pilot really will be quite far ahead of the curve.
No, and there's something more, which was also my second talk at the Shenzhen conference, which is the possibility of running small scripts inside the flight controller. We've recently had the capability of running Lua scripts inside Autopilot, and for the most of the simplest tasks, you don't need a companion computer. You might get doing with Lua scripting inside Autopilot. So that's something very new for Autopilot, and it is another option. So you can have the flight controller and running simple missions. That's back and forth, like we all know and hate. You can have Lua scripting running inside Autopilot and taking smart decisions, or you can have the other way, plugging an external computer, be it a Raspberry Pi or Intel i7 or one of the NVIDIA small board computers. So lots of options now.
And with that, has anyone else got anything else? Because we're just coming up on 2 hours. Any more for any more?
No. A quick one with freedom of information, because I got one back today. You can't get an overall figure for cautions, because we know the figures by the CPS with prosecutions, which are quite low. Well, I thought it would be interesting to have got the caution figures to see how, because obviously that gives you a better idea of how the police are dealing with it and how many people really are getting a slap on the hand. Apparently each force records it slightly differently, so they can't do it at national level. But some of the police drone teams have already been raising this with the CAA and saying really there ought to be a way to have a single figure. So maybe we will get to that point, but that will then give a better idea of the whole debate around enforcement. Because obviously the impression is there's very little enforcement. But I think the truth would be, if you look to cautions, there will be more people getting a slap on the hand that we know about, and at least that's something rather than nothing. Because it still counts as like a conviction on your record, Ken. I think it's still a criminal act. So I still wouldn't see it as being entirely trivial, although some people view it that way. But yeah, apparently we can't get the figure, but I've asked. So
good man. And then, all right, finally, Mitchell Roberts is asking, any news on solid state LiDAR? Anyone have any news on
There are a few, yes. The ones that have good characteristics are crazy expensive. Look, Velodyne type prices. I think the ones that we can see at the hobby level have very limited ranges, but we'll get there. The LiDAR is another possibility, but I'm with Mr. Elon Musk on this one. I don't believe LiDAR, I believe vision.
Well, yeah, horses for courses, isn't it? All right. With that, then, look, as we're rolling up 9 minutes off 2 hours, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your contributions and taking your time out as ever. And thank you, dear viewer, wherever you might be in the world. I hope you have a very safe rest of the week. And if you're going to Area 51, please send us some pictures. We'd love to see what happens there. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week at 2100 GMT when we build a system for James.
I'm now about to go off and sit back on the fence again. So
Going and pulling up a drawbridge or something like that now. There's all sorts of other things we could do, isn't there? All right, guys. Thank you very much. Dear viewers, thank you. Be safe. Look after yourselves. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Oh, nowhere near the stop button.